Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Happier at Work podcast, the award-winning career and culture podcast for people first leaders. I'm your host, Aoife O'Brien, and you may have seen already from the title, this episode is the episode that was recorded live. If you're a long-time listener, you would have heard me talking about this, getting excited about a live recording. This was recorded in Dublin on a very miserable, wet and rainy and cold and dark night, and I'm so grateful for everyone who made it, who showed up live, and I'm so excited to share this episode with you. It's my first time ever to record in front of a live audience. I absolutely loved it and I will definitely be doing it again. My guest was the brilliant Aaron Doyle. He's the people director of Johnson Hana. They were the sponsors of the event and of this episode, so definitely go and check them out. Johnson Hana are a legal services firm putting the happy back into work, so there was such a great alignment between what we were doing, and I was so happy to have them on board with this episode. Aaron shares some absolutely fantastic insights around workplace culture, values, bringing your whole self to work, and the importance of authenticity. And we also talk about maintaining that positive work culture in a flexible working environment. So I know you're really going to enjoy today's episode. As always, do let me know what you thought. Interact on social media, drop me a message. And if you're listening in real time, don't forget to tune in on Monday for the bonus episode, and I will pull out all of the key points that Aaron and I spoke about. Aaron, you're so welcome to the Happier at Work podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I can't tell you how much I've been looking forward to this episode.
I
know, it's flown in. We are recording this in front of a live studio audience.
Not nerve-wracking at all.
Not nerve-wracking at all. A really nice audience. I think they're going to go
really
easy on us. They're going to go gentle on us tonight. Okay. Do you want to let people know a little bit about your background? What brought you to where you are today?
So I work for Johnson Hana. I'm Director of People Operations, and my role mainly revolves around building the people strategy, recruitment, and then the kind of nurturing of the team as well. My background before that was I've kind of spent a career building out HR functions in tech companies was the past, or in startups, mainly tech. Before that, worked for a company called Sendoso. It was a US multinational coming to Ireland. Really great time there. I was first hired in Europe, so built out the teams.
Wow.
And it was really good role, really exciting. We grew really fast. Grew to about 90 people within about a year. So that was to support the growth that we were seeing, which was huge growth at the time. So it was a really good role, very good culture that we built as well. That was the first time that I'd really been involved in the building of a culture as well at that level, and I loved it. Yeah. And it was something I was really proud of what we built. If there's anybody listening to this that was there, they'll know what we were talking about, because it was just, we did really great work. We really enjoyed being there. We had a lot of fun in the process as well. So I loved that. And then all the other kind of 360 HR aspects that came with that as well was within my remit. Yeah, about 2 years ago, I met the guys from Johnson Hana. They said that they were building out HR function, that they needed to support the growth that they were having. I loved what they were doing as soon as I heard about it. I really, and I met the guys and I really liked them as well. Met the wider team, really liked them, and 2 years later, here we are. So.
And can I say, that doesn't surprise me at all, you know, having experienced firsthand, I think, the culture that you've created here. But maybe can we take a step back and say, what is culture? Like, how would you define company culture?
Yeah, so I look at it as the way we do things around here. Yeah. And I think that's broadly accepted. That's the definition of what it is. Yeah. And for me, it's really hard to look at one thing. I think it looks at the behaviours that are deemed the norm within the group. I think that's the first thing. It's how we interact with each other, it's how we speak, it's how we work with clients, how we work with prospective clients, it's how we put ourselves forward to the market, work with our teams, decisions we make as a business and how we make decisions as well. You know, do we offer flexibility, do we offer part-time working, do we offer everything like that? That whole, how we do things around here is what I would view.
You're totally speaking my language now. Like, for me, it's how we do things around here. For me, the values and the behaviours within an organisation is a key part of that. And the decisions, like you're saying. So what policies do we have? But if we create this culture, how do we make sure that it is what we say it is?
Yeah, so I mean, I think looking at your values is really powerful. I think your values should be your guiding light for behaviour. Yeah. And they shouldn't be just something that's on the wall that, you know, the leadership team have scribbled down and put a little thought into. When I joined Johnson Hana, we were looking at how do we change our values to reflect the change that the company was going through at the time, so kind of that startup to scale up. Yeah. And what we did was we looked at how do we want the company to behave as a team, but we asked the wider team as well. So it wasn't just the leadership team dictating what that looked like. We went to the wider team and we asked them, we had 3 lists. We had personal values and behaviours, professional values and behaviours, and things that they really didn't want to see. Yeah. And we had 20 of each, and we asked them to pick their top 7. And then we kind of whittled that down to what's the most common 5. So you had the 20 on a list, and people were asked to rank them on a scale of 1 to 7. What do you deem to be most important to least important? Yeah. And we got some really good stuff back, and that told us how people wanted to behave with their colleagues, how they wanted the business to behave, how they wanted to be perceived in the market, what was non-negotiable, things like pointy elbows, you know, what does that mean? That pointy, do you know that kind of get out of my way, I'm in a hurry. Kind of nastiness that kind of competitive, almost aggressive, you know, that kind of culture, like that's something we didn't want. Negativity, that kind of, you know, coming with problems without solutions. Things that we wanted to see were respect, integrity, authenticity, you know, being innovative, disruptive, moving fast. These were the kind of things that kept coming up. So then we took all that information away as a team and we looked at how do we make these into statements. We didn't want to just have, you know, integrity written on the wall. We didn't want to do that. We wanted to build that out into statements. And these became guiding lights then as to how we want people to behave. Well, that's like before we started recording, we were having a bit of a chat earlier, and we were talking about this idea of like respect and integrity. Should they just be normal? Like, would you not just expect that from a workplace that you have those things anyway? Do you need to explicitly say, here we treat each other with respect, or here we act in integrity? I think I definitely agree with you that they should be non-negotiables. I think there's no harm in emphasising. One of the things that we ask people to do is the idea of being authentic, bring your authentic self to work. And that to us is something that just reaffirms like you can be you. That was one that we wanted to say and specifically say, you're welcome here, you can be yourself, you don't have to be pretend to be something you're not, we don't do fakes, just be yourself. So that was one that we wanted to be kind of specific on. But I totally agree, like these things should be accepted as just what they are. You should always be, it's just not always the case. Yeah, exactly. Do you know that kind of way? It's unfortunate to have to say that, like people should always have integrity, they should operate with respect, businesses should do the right thing, they should have morals and ethics, but we wanted to just be very clear on what that looked like as well. Can I just say, like from all of the interactions that I've had, that really comes through for me. I think like people say to me, you're so authentic. And I did, if anyone's on my email list, I sent an email out a few weeks ago about this whole idea of authenticity. And for me, it's showing up as you are, and as I describe it sometimes, like keeping it real. Like this is the reality, this little setup that I have going on here, this is how I do it at home. It's not different, we're not in a like big professional environment or anything like that. And the thing that springs to my mind was that a few years ago, I used to do these LinkedIn Lives all the time with my podcast guests. So we'd have a podcast guest or podcast episode released, and then a few days later, I'd go live on LinkedIn and have a kind of a follow-up conversation for about 10 minutes with the podcast guest. And one time, I think I had a phone call with someone else, had like a Zoom call with someone else prior to that. And my plan had been to dry my hair and to, you know, put on a bit of makeup and stuff like that. And I got so engrossed in the conversation that I was having with this other person that I didn't have time. And so I showed up LinkedIn Live with wet hair and no makeup. And for me, it's keeping it real. Like this is what life is, that sometimes you get busy, you get distracted, you get pulled away from things. And I have wet hair and that's just how it is. And so that's kind of for me. And just to say that has come across, that has come through so strongly in all of the interactions that I've had with anyone from here, so appreciate that. I appreciate that. That's what we try and do. Be ourselves and be real. We get told an awful lot that we're sound, and I know that's a very Irish thing to say, and that's why we haven't put it in as our values or anything like that. It might translate. But it's that nature of just being ourselves. And being nice. Being nice, I think. So for anyone, because I know there's listeners from all over the world. It's like sound. Like, I know. The easiest way to describe it is probably nice. I don't know. Like, do people agree? Like, it's just nice. But maybe like in building on that, how do you make sure that the people that you bring into the organization are also
nice, like that they're sound, that they have those values as well, and that you're not hiring in people who are toxic.
No, it's a really good question. And when we're doing interviews, we try and ask questions around behaviour as well. And you never, like, you get a sense from somebody first of all. You can tell from the interactions, and sometimes the most powerful interactions might be the scheduling of the emails. Or the interviews, you know, that kind of way. That can be powerful as well, those comms.
Everything is a bit of a telltale sign.
Kind of. There's going to be people listening to this now, right? When I'm emailing them about interviews, they're going to be really making sure they're super sound on their comms. But no, to that effect, like asking behavioural questions, like tell me about your favourite person you've ever worked with. Why did you like working with them? I think that's powerful. Tell me about the manager that's gotten the best out of you. How did they get the best out of you? How does a prospective manager get the best out of you? Tell me about a colleague that you found difficult to work with. Why did you find them difficult to work with?
That's not an easy question to answer, I think, in an interview situation, is it?
It's not. And we try and make that, it's, you know, we're having a very real chat. And, you know, if somebody isn't honest, it's a disservice for them, it's for us. You know, that kind of way. You
can hardly show up and say, I got on with everyone, or I never had a problem with any of my colleagues, because that's just a lie.
Yeah, exactly.
You're always going to there's always going to be someone who kind of rubs you up the wrong way, or that you just don't gel with, or whatever it might be.
And the follow-on to that sometimes is, you know, tell me about how you worked with them. Like, how did you navigate some of those differences that you might have had?
Or not.
But no, that would be, you try and understand and asking, like, what's culture mean to you as well, what behaviours do you value, these kind of things. Get as much information about the person's behaviour as possible is something I'm trying to do.
And hopefully people know that, like, this is, I suppose, a drum that I'm trying to bang for the last few years, is understanding as an individual that you have values as well. I'll share one of the examples, which was Simple. And this was an American company and the most bureaucratic company I ever worked in my life. The example I always think of is if I wanted to send an email to a group of clients using our marketing software, I had to get approval from one of only 2 people in the US in order to send out this email to our local clients in Ireland. Like, to me, that's overly bureaucratic and it's not showing a level of trust. It's definitely not something that's simple to do either. So it's something that always kind of springs to my mind. But I never knew that I, as an individual, also have values, and that my values should be in alignment with the values of the organization. And it goes a long way, I think, to understand what your own values are, so that you know what you stand for, so you know the kind of environment that you're going to fit in really well with. And all of this comes from those negative experiences, let's say, that I had at work, and the whole reason that I set up my business in the first place. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that, about toxic work environments, you know, and do you have any experience of working in toxic environments? Okay,
they're not on my LinkedIn or anything like that, so I can speak freely enough about it. It was a company I worked when I was in college, and it was a call centre, and it was a really tough role. I shouldn't have gotten the job. I was terrible at it. I'm not the profile that does that well. I don't like rejection. So that's all I was getting all day. Like, I didn't love that. But all I remember with the place was everything was grey. Like, we were doing really unenjoyable, for me anyway, unenjoyable work. But everything was grey. It was like grey chairs, grey floors, grey office, grey everything. I don't know how they found these, like grey everything. And those really clinical ceiling lights, like hospital ceiling lights. So it was that was the environment. And then the work wasn't amazing for me. The product that we were selling actually wasn't a very nice product. So we didn't love that part of it. That was kind of conflicting for me. You couple that with the management style was really heavy on inputs, like micromanagement on the inputs.
Wow,
really nasty metrics. Like one of these boards with call times on it, which, you know, if you're having a bad day or if you weren't good at it, which I wasn't, you're kind of named and shamed amongst the group, you know, it's very apparent, which I didn't love. And then the kind of the culture that you can imagine that goes with that is a slightly aggressive kind of micromanagement as well. Like highly competitive if you're things. And I suppose, like, before you kind of share more about that, I'm interested to know, do you think that there are some people who would really thrive in that environment? So it wasn't a good fit for you. And that's caveat in that, but it wasn't for me whatsoever. Some people would. But did some people love it? Did, like, where you were, did some people love it? Okay. Because of the product. because the product
okay.
just wasn't a particularly a good product to be selling. So I think that was the problem with it. But some people were good at that. Do you know what I mean? Some people could handle that, and some people were top of the list, and they were, you know, they'd have the swagger that goes with being top of the list. And for me, that just wasn't something that I liked. So for me, it was total misalignment, and it probably goes back to I shouldn't have been hired there.
Yeah,
that was just a bad hire.
Yeah,
and I was the bad hire
on their part.
It wasn't a fit.
As the time of this recording, I've just come back from Cork. I was down in Cork for a few days, and it brought back a whole load of memories. Early career for me, where I was hired to do something not dissimilar to that. I was pounding the pavements in Cork, going from business to business, trying to drum up sales, advertising sales essentially for a magazine that hadn't been launched yet. So this was, if I think about it, the totally wrong kind of job for me. I was not too long out of college and had some involvement with the people who were involved in this magazine, and they thought it would be a great idea to put me in this position, and all the memories came back when I was back down in Cork. I was like, I remember going into that business, or that's changed completely now, and it's completely, you know, it's a different one. But also thinking, how far have I come in my career, and how wrong that was of a fit for what I'm good at and what I'm not good at, which I have awareness of. But maybe coming back to this idea of I suppose the toxic, and the fact that you think that was a mishire then on their part, and how to maybe avoid doing those kinds of things.
Absolutely, and like that's expensive for a business.
Exactly.
Do you know, like I wasn't of no value to that company. Really, I was not performing. I probably cost them money. I think it's looking at making sure that when you're interviewing, that you're making sure you're actually interviewing correctly. Like that you're not going with. Sometimes you see it, especially in startups, gut feel. And look, there's a bit of ways in good feel. You know, you have to have that kind of. Sometimes that's where you might get that values compatibility piece or behaviour compatibility. But looking at, can this person actually do the job from a competency standpoint? Do they have the technical knowledge to do the job? And I just didn't. I was in college at the time. I hadn't even left college. And I was totally mishired there. So like, you know, a competency round in that process would have helped, as opposed to maybe a good feel.
Do you have any experiences, either for yourself or other people, of that kind of sounds like a general not a great culture, but more toxic because of the competency mismatch? But any experiences more from a culture perspective where you're like, oh, this is just not a great fit for me culturally?
Do you know what, I've been really lucky to not. That was one, and the kind of the cultural misalignment there was potentially there was a really strong them and us management, which I really didn't like either. And that can be touch wood, and it's probably it's something I'm very lucky to say that I genuinely haven't. You sometimes come across bad actors in companies, you know, that have a kind of a slightly toxic agenda. Maybe if somebody's disengaged and they're potentially on the way out or something like that. You know, you do see that, especially in HR. You become made aware of them. But no, for the most part, I'm very lucky. But when you do even have somebody like that, it's incredible how quickly they can become disruptive to the group. Like that toxic nature is contagious. And
it's interesting you say that, because I definitely was that person in a couple of different scenarios where I wasn't enjoying, and I love your description. You're like the bad actor. I'm like, yes, I can totally relate to that. I had two situations, and anyone again who's listened to the podcast for a while or who knows my personal story, there was one where it was like, this is just a toxic situation. It was misogynistic. I was made a lot of promises. They didn't deliver on those promises, and they probably thought, golden handcuffs, she's not going to leave this role. And I did leave because I thought, I'm not taking this, I'm not having it, and I'm going to leave. 100%. And then the second one, it was less of a toxic environment generally, but more just a not good fit culturally for me. I felt like I came with all of this experience, but I didn't feel fulfilled. I didn't feel like I was reaching my potential in that role. And so again, after years of staying in a role, I loved it, I hated it, I just left. I was like, I cannot do this anymore. I don't want to stay here. But I was that disruptive person, probably in both of those situations, you know, making it not so pleasant for other people. But I think it's important to address those things. I don't think anyone ever really addressed it with me. They never challenged me on it or anything.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think that is often the job of the manager
to
understand, and especially in one-to-ones. Like one-to-ones can be incredibly powerful feedback loops. Like surveys are great and quarterly surveys, but you don't understand who the person is behind it, especially if they're anonymous. Most surveys are. But if you get that, everybody knows if there's somebody like that. You can tell by the behaviour, you know who that person is. And it's worth having a conversation of asking, look, are you happy here? Is there something wrong? It might prompt them to make a move, potentially, or it might actually correct behaviours. And you might actually get the person back. Like, it could be something relatively small, it could be something that could be addressed, and you get the person back on side, and then they start adding value again. Do you know that kind of way? Now, someone, like you said, in your situation, I can't blame you for leaving. I think more people should be brave enough to actually leave in those situations, because it puts manners on. That's what I was.
I mean, that's what I was going to ask about, because oftentimes, and I talk to my friends about this all the time, they stay in situations that are not serving them whatsoever. And exactly, like for me, life is too short. But why do you think people stay in those kind of toxic situations?
Is it a comfort? Is it a lack of
or a
confidence,
fear?
Is
Or
it a fear? Is it something like that?
I'm on good money, I'm not going to make the same money.
And I think it's only when people actually leave and start looking elsewhere, sometimes in those situations, that they do see, oh my God, what was I doing? Especially when you're at that point where if there's something to that effect that there's no going back from. It's a tough one to understand why people do. You know, it is. I think it's a lack of potentially confidence, potentially a fear, golden handcuffs. You know, it's will I get the same money elsewhere? I mean, if you go through a process with companies, you'll find the grass can be greener sometimes out there. Do you know, that kind of way? Like if you're stuck in a job that you really don't love, and you start looking elsewhere, you will find opportunities. And those things that you might have to fear about, you're often not fully correct.
I've talked about this, and I'm not sure if I've spoken about it on the podcast, but I was very lucky early career that I found a few places that I loved. I loved working there. It was an amazing culture. And you can say that kind of spoiled me for anything else, because when I got to those other roles, it was like, this is not the same. I know there's something not quite right here. I can't place my finger on it. It's with retrospect, I look back and I go, that's what was going on there. But at the time, it's just a feeling that this is not quite right. This is not a good fit for me. I'm not happy here and I need to get out. But I think so sometimes, like it could be fear. It could be loads of different reasons. People feel like they're stuck or they don't have a choice in those situations. But going back to your earlier point of this is the opportunity for the manager to step in, like what kind of things do you think that managers could and should be doing to maintain that positive culture in an organisation?
First of all, operate with trust.
I
think that has to be, you have to trust your people.
So you mean when you're measuring people's keystrokes to see when they're
I can't understand that you've hired a person to do the job. You hired them in good faith, and you hired them because you have a reason to hire them. Let them do the job that you hired them to do. Don't tell them how to do it. That doesn't make sense. You should still do it yourself if that's the case. Just, giving them autonomy to do the work. Don't necessarily give them the solution. Give them the problem and let them figure it out. Because you're not getting the best out of somebody like that. I think those two things together add to the job satisfaction that somebody has. People want to be challenged. Don't want to be overstretched, but challenged. And that keeps people engaged. I think when people like the work they're doing, it's a big plus. You look at a wider range of comp and benefits, that all has to align anyway. But in terms of the psychological stuff, safety is really important as well. People need to feel safe. And safety and challenge and trust, treat people like adults. And then other things, like for that individual, do they need flexibility? Is flexibility something that they really value? Does this person have commitments outside of work that a slightly later start or a slightly earlier finish would really guide them with? And allow them for that. Like, if you trust your people to do good work and allow them to do good work and give them problems to solve and to deliver, give them a bit of space to do it. I think that's important. And then looking close enough at potential changes in behaviour. Like, is this person that used to be really engaged and really ready to go, are they tired? Like, are they potentially, is that something that's happening? Are we in a kind of a burnout situation? Potentially, if they've been going and going and going. Managers need to keep pulse on a lot of those different things and can do true one-to-ones and true honest conversation and coffee.
I think oftentimes managers are overworked, they're overloaded, and they don't notice, or they don't know it's their job. They might think it's, this is HR's job to notice these things or to figure things out, to anticipate these types of things. But I suppose maybe it's making clear as a manager, this is, it's your responsibility to have those conversations, to notice those things.
And I think, as a HR function, training managers and supporting managers is really important. If there's a time of the year where you have slightly less work than others, maybe it's Christmas, maybe it's summer, can you do some training with managers if needed to help them support their employees in those ways? Can you do one-to-one training? Can you set expectations there? Or if managers, are spotting something and they're not sure how to play, like, I've always said in any company I've worked in, never leave yourself stuck. Like, flag this with us early.
Yeah.
Like, just if you have something, even a good feel, just get it over to us and you can start thinking about it.
I think sometimes people are worried about that, and we're not kind of going to go down a total different avenue on this, but just to flag the fact that a lot of people are feeling overwhelmed, and sometimes it's really difficult to ask for help because the perception is, if I ask for help, people will think I can't cope with the workload, they think I can't do it, and it's going to reflect badly on me, when actually normally the opposite is the case. If you flag something early and say, listen, I need some support with this, or I can't get everything done, or I'm feeling this way, then it helps to mitigate the issue rather than it blows up in a few weeks' time when you can't cope at all.
100%. Or sometimes you see people, chipping away with extra hours and stuff like that. It's kind of like the duck underwater, that kind of thing. But the work is getting done, and if there's a team of people all doing, let's say 4 people doing 10 hours a week extra, the manager might be none the wiser because the work is getting done. There's no gap. But that's in itself, that's a new headcount. That's a 40-hour week that needs to be filled.
Exactly.
That's being fulfilled, and if the work gets done and nobody flags it, the manager might be none the wiser. Because the work's getting done. It's okay.
I'm so glad you said that, because that is so true. And I think there's one thing to be said for busy work and this work doesn't need to be done, but if the work genuinely needs to be done and it's been split across the team as is, that is justification for 100%. We actually need someone else to do this. You made a point earlier, Aaron, about this idea of the inputs versus the outputs. Can we talk a little bit more about that? Because I think we tend to get so hung up on the inputs and how much time we're spending at work and how much energy it takes to do something and all these things, when actually we should be focusing on, well, what are the deliverables? What are the objectives? What are the outcomes I'm trying to achieve and the impact that I want to have with the work that I'm doing? And how do we get that? What's the best way to do that? And I suppose me being me in the most efficient way as well. So any thoughts on like how to make that shift?
We look at KPIs. We put a lot of weight on KPIs or OKRs, whichever the model lends itself better to. And we tend to do it the same way. We tend to have kind of 3 key deliverables. Just 3. Like within your role, you're responsible for 3 things.
Okay.
We have a couple of things that feed into that. So we have like category and then key results that feed into that. Just tangibles to make this big piece happen. And then let people do it. Do you know what I mean? Leave it alone. Let people do it.
I'm here for support, but that's your job. That's your problem to solve.
Exactly.
Get on with it.
Bottlenecks, tell me. If you need any help, tell me. But here's a problem for you to solve, and go and solve it, kind of thing. And here's some key results that if you can do these, you have a very high likelihood of being successful with this. That's the way we kind of build it. It's not to say we're going to measure this, we're going to measure this, we're going to measure this. These are the likelihoods that if you do all these, you'll achieve this. And I think that's a really good way of doing it. And the way we do it is break that down as the team needs to deliver, company needs to deliver X, maybe a revenue target. What does every function need to deliver to feed into that? And then what does every individual need to do to feed into their team target to feed in? So it creates this unity and togetherness. People understand why they're doing the work they're doing. And then managers can give people a little bit of flexibility that as long as these things are getting done, the team is going to deliver and the company is going to deliver. And if you know what that looks like, and you can keep a pulse on what it looks like for people, you don't need to micromanage it. But if the outputs are being achieved, that's perfect.
That's where we need to be. And again, I think this kind of, we touched on the idea of flexible working earlier, but it that lends itself, I think, to more flexible working, because when we focus so much on the inputs, it's and I always think of this as an example, that my friend said to me. She said, well, I worked 2 hours extra on Wednesday, therefore I can knock off 2 hours extra on Friday. And I think that's the mentality that a lot of people have. we're so focused so much on the number of hours that we put into the job that we have, rather than I've achieved this outcome and therefore I can take the whole of Friday off because I've achieved what I set out to achieve on Thursday already. You know, it does take a shift in mentality, but for me, that's where work is going.
I totally agree with you. It's like the idea of somebody works really well and gets all the work done, like you said, by Thursday.
Yeah.
To give them more work on Friday.
Exactly.
You know,
it's
not fair. So yeah, totally. If people can get their work done the way that works for them, absolutely take time back where you can. And there is, like with us, we're a client-facing, delivery-focused business.
Yeah.
There's times where we have to go all hands on deck.
Yeah.
The expectation is there'll be downtime as well.
Exactly.
And it comes in waves. And take it when you can.
And I think a lot of businesses are like that. I certainly come from that type of background where it's all about client, and we had a degree of flexibility, but there were certain levels of flexibility that we couldn't have because we were client facing.
Yeah.
And then certain times of the year where it was a bit more, like you say, all hands on deck, this needs to be delivered, or a particular team needs support, so let's all help out with this one particular team to make sure that they get that deliverable, which is so meaningful for our business. We had a chat before we started recording with someone in the room about this idea of, I suppose, the hybrid model and how to maintain culture in that hybrid type of model. Yeah. And at the time of recording, we're in the context of Apple have just mandated a 5-day return to office. I will do a solo episode about my thoughts on this, and maybe the both sides of the story, because there are two sides to the story, and then maybe what the trickle down effect will be for other organizations. Because, I think one way to describe it is we've seen behind the curtain. If you're familiar with the Wizard of Oz, like we're seeing what's going on behind the curtain. We're very well capable of working from home, of being productive. But at the same time, and I've had lots of conversations about this over the last few weeks, about there's certain types of organizations that are required to always be, whether it's on site, in a factory, whatever it might be, there are certain types of organizations. And is that fair that some people get to work from home and other people don't? So there's loads of different sides for it from that perspective. But I think the particular context that we were talking about was, well, the agreement is this one thing, but actually people are not really sticking to that agreement. And I suppose maybe there's a few layers to this question. It's thinking, how do we maintain the culture that we've set for our organization in that remote/hybrid type of environment? But also, if people aren't following the quote unquote rules, how do we make sure that that we address those issues? Yeah,
it's a tough question, and my take on it is visibility doesn't always equal productivity. Yeah. So when you have people in the office 5 days a week, it doesn't necessarily mean they're doing their best work. Some people,
and we think that. I think the perception is, if you're in the office, that you're doing that. You could be on Facebook, you could be doing all sorts of things, but you're happen to be in the office.
Just chatting. Like I'm really guilty of this. Yeah. Sometimes when I'm in the office, I am so unproductive because I'm having conversations.
Yeah.
But our model is we come in on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and we try and get a Thursday, as often as we can, every month or 6 weeks or so, and socialise afterwards. But what we say to people is there's a purpose for when you come in. We front load meetings, one-to-ones, coffees, lunches on those 2 days. Yeah. So that gets everybody together. Yeah. And it gives a chance for information to flow, good meetings to happen, whiteboard sessions. If you look into any of the rooms, all those walls can be written on. There's whiteboards everywhere.
I did notice that earlier, yeah.
We want people to be having good conversations, creative, innovative conversations, and that happens with a whiteboard sometimes. Yeah. It's a little bit old school, but it works. So giving people purpose for when they're coming in. I hate the idea of somebody coming in on a day like today, lashing around for 2 hours on a bus or something like that to do work they could be doing at home. Yeah. Give them a purpose, and that purpose sometimes can be social as well. But there's work that happens better in the office, and try and get people together on those days, or even if it's just to get everybody together for lunch at 1 o'clock on a Tuesday, is something that we really like. And sometimes upstairs it's great to see these long tables that hold 6 people aside, and it's great that everybody can kind of come together there, or even if people go out and get lunch, they bring it back, and that's a really lovely part of the culture, that people want to gather on those days. And it's giving people, facilitating that togetherness, but not giving people, not saying come in and do the same work you could do at home. Yeah. from the office. That to me doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
I know there's some companies that just have to work in the office, you know, the work they do has to be hands-on, but I think where you can bring people together when there's a reason, and that reason could be information, catching up, one-to-ones, social, whatever it is, and then let people do the work they can do from home. And to answer the point of how do you address that, I don't like the idea of blanket mandating, say 2 days a week or 3 days a week, and not picking the 2 days, because people might miss each other. Like I could do 2 days in the office and my manager could do 2 days and we might never see each other. You know, the nature of it. So that purpose on those days brings people together. I think if people aren't doing it, you've got to really question that. It's a bad example, and sometimes what we see is people that have been in the business for longer don't throw in with this. They kind of take a little bit of liberty on what days they come in or not. And sorry, not here, but just as a wider example. I've heard this, people longer term, certain people in businesses might say, oh look, I mightn't come in today, or to that effect, but I think you got to come down harder on it. I think you got to address it, because it sets an example for these kind of senior people in the business that have a senior standing, showing everybody else.
They're the role models.
Exactly.
They're the role models.
Exactly. And that might be showing what good looks like, which is what these people should be doing.
And I think one of the big issues is that and this is not just for hybrid, flexible working, whatever. This is generally from a culture perspective, that we don't have those difficult conversations when we need to have them. Like I mentioned earlier, if I was that bad actor, no one had that conversation with me. I knew I was acting up. I knew I was, and I was getting away with it. So like, there's nothing to stop me from being a little brat, as we say in Ireland. I'm sure they say that in other places as well. But that's what I was. Definitely on more than one occasion. And like, maybe let's talk about how do we have those difficult conversations from a culture perspective, not from a toxic perspective, not from the perspective of we're talking about hybrid or people are not. It just generally, here's our values, here's the behaviours we expect, and here's one person at least who's not behaving in the way that we would expect based on our values and what we say we want people, how we want people to behave in the office. And how do we start having those conversations?
Like I really like the radical candor for feedback. I think it's brilliant.
And we'll put a link to the book in the show notes.
It's the idea of being empathetic but being direct. That, you know, it's like if somebody has something stuck in their teeth. It's the example I always use. You know, you can say, you can be direct, and you can be polite. It's the same. Like,
and then there's how many people won't say anything.
Exactly. And that's part of that model as well. Or somebody can go, you've got something stuck in your teeth.
And you don't want to say it in front of people, and you don't want to say it in an obnoxious way. You want to just let someone know subtly. That you've got something going on here. You need to fix it. Go to the bathroom, whatever.
Exactly. So that same effect, just that kind of polite word. And in these situations when it's with behaviour, I think it's fair to say, like, come with data, not opinion. Say, like, look, on this occasion, this is what I saw. This is the behaviour displayed, and this is the impact it has. What we'd love
it's all about the impact, isn't it?
It's the impact. It's not, because otherwise
it's not you as a person.
Exactly.
It's not your personality.
No,
it's
on this occasion, you did this. This is what we saw. This was the impact it had, and this is what it's led to.
But this is also, it's the perception, isn't it? Like, this is how you're coming across.
Exactly.
And is that the brand that you want to put out there? Is that how you want to be perceived? Is that what you want to be known for?
Exactly. And sometimes you're doing the person a favour. The same way as if you tell them about something, they might be none the wiser that this is going on, and they mightn't actually want to be behaving in this way. But I think that's a good place to start the conversation, because at least if you follow the radical candor, you can have direct conversation about it, but it's framed in the right way. You're assuming the person has best intentions of resolving this problem when you enter into the conversation. And you take it from there as to how it goes. But I think that gives a good likelihood of resolving it successfully.
I think that's a fair approach. But the trouble is recognizing when we need to have those conversations to begin with, I think, and just saying, listen, not putting it off. You don't wait till your quarterly check-in. You don't wait till your end-of-year review. You have those conversations, and you have them immediately. It's not about the person and their personality. It's about the impact. and how they're showing up at work and what needs to be addressed. And in your experience, does that work to like reinstate? Because as you mentioned earlier, if you have that bad apple, then that's kind of impacting on all of the people around it, and it spreads like, oh, well, that person's acting like that, so I think I can do that as well. You know, he's getting away with that, so why can't I?
Yeah, and I think, you know, people want to be liked. When somebody joins a group, we inherently want to be liked.
Yeah,
by our
good point.
peers and
Yeah,
people around us.
yeah.
And
we don't deliberately try and piss other people off. Is that what you're trying to say?
We do, you made a bad hire. But if somebody's just not picking up on that cultural norm or that behavioural norm, and they're kind of, you know, going off in a slightly different direction with the behaviour, and it's potentially it has the potential to get them disliked by people in the group, you're doing them a favour.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And it's potentially a way of saying it to them. And generally, people, if they're told about it and they can fix it, they will, because it falls into that. Like, I think a really good test for your culture is to ask somebody in the business what gets you liked and what gets you disliked.
Oh, yeah, that's a powerful question, I think. Yeah. You
can go a bit further about culture and say, how would you describe the culture, and then how would the leaders describe the culture? That's another.
And is it different?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think if I was interviewing in a company, I'd ask those kind of questions: what gets you liked? What gets you disliked? What the leaders say about culture? What the leaders do about culture? I think that gives you a really good picture of what it's like in a place.
I think that's brilliant for someone going into an organisation to make sure that if you've ever been in this toxic situation before, that you're not going in. And I know so many people who've gone from one toxic situation into directly into another toxic situation. Yeah, and like you think that you've done okay, and then it turns out that it's really not. But those are brilliant questions, and I think definitely bear those in mind if you're trying to get out of a toxic situation and looking for a new job. Aaron, we've talked about so many different aspects of workplace culture. Is there anything you think that we haven't really touched on that you want to maybe get across?
I think we've had a really good conversation.
Yeah.
There's a lot in this subject.
Yeah.
I feel like we could sit here for hours.
Oh, we could, yeah. I think in the interest of getting people home on a rainy Dublin night.
No, that's everything.
Yeah. And if people want to find out more about Johnson Hana, about what you do, what's the best place that they can do that?
LinkedIn. Reach out to myself on LinkedIn, Aaron Doyle or Johnson Hana. Follow us on our website, our socials, anything like that.
Brilliant.
You can contact us on LinkedIn.
And the question I ask everyone who comes on the podcast: what does being happier at work mean to you?
I think the simplest definition is not having fear on a Sunday night.
Yeah.
Not thinking, oh my God, what's my week going to look like?
Yeah.
Not dreading going into work.
I think everyone can, like, I've had that. I think so many people can relate to that.
I had it all through school. I hated school. I had all through school. And I never wanted to feel like that in my career.
Yeah.
And thankfully I don't. Yeah. And I want people in their roles to have the same experience. Yeah. I hate the idea of somebody on a Sunday night or 5 o'clock on Sunday going, oh my God, I have to go to work tomorrow. Yeah. That's the situation I want to avoid for the company I'm in. And
just now that you're talking about it, I'm like, I can feel that. I can sense the anxiety of, I have to go into a job that I hate with people that I don't really like a lot. And
or sitting in the car park going, I can't go in here. Yeah. That's the opposite of that. And in its glory, the opposite of what that is what happy work is.
And that's everything that I stand for, I suppose, and why I do what I do. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been amazing. My first ever live recording of the Happier at Work podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah. Thank you so much, Aaron.
Thank you. Cheers.
That was Aaron Doyle from Johnson Hana, the sponsors of this episode and the live recording, which was done in their offices in Dublin City Centre. Definitely go and check those out, and I will put a link in the show notes below so you can find out all about their services. As always, I will be doing a synopsis as a bonus episode, so if you're listening in real time, that will be out on Monday. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to leave a rating or review, and I look forward to interacting with you on LinkedIn. Next week, I have another brilliant episode for you, all about sustainable learning and development.